Hello, and welcome to yet another episode of the Back to the TARDIS podcast, the podcast where we take a look at every single episode of the 2005 revival of BBC's Doctor Who. I'm Jeff.
I'm Skylar.
And I'm Nomad Dirk.
And this week, we're discussing Series 6, Episode 11, The God Complex by my boy, my man, Toby Whithouse. Tell me, folks, is it just me, or does the man churn out quality mid-season episodes every time?
He's got some bangers.
Yeah.
Goddamn.
Yeah. Fuck, man. This is another... I don't think it shines quite as high for me personally as Girl Who Waited, but that's also... if someone said, yeah, this is my favorite Series 6 episode, I'd be like, yeah, dude, fair, okay. It's really good.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that.
Yeah. In this episode, the Doctor, Amy, and Rory find themselves in a mysterious 1980s hotel, which they soon realize to be of alien origin and to contain a beast that is stalking and killing its inhabitants. And it's also notable for being the story where Amy and Rory should have left for good.
Yeah, I mean, I already knew it was gonna be like that, but after watching it, just wow, yeah, how the fuck did they bring them back after this? What the hell?
I understand bringing them back for the finale, but the finale also ends in such a way that they don't actually, they don't come back on. They just are there for that episode.
I feel like this could have been a finale, honestly. This feels like a better finale than some of the ones we've gotten. It feels so definitive that I feel like if they had just somehow set up the the complex and stuff, if they had left little hints of people disappearing or whatever, or kind of done what they did in season 8 with Missy, where people end up there at the end of episodes and the Doctor doesn't know about it, but then the audience knows about it, so it's kind of set up something like that. And this had been the finale. I think season 6 would have been a really good season, despite some of the mishaps. God, this is just so much of a better plot than the actual plot of the season.
But see, the problem is that Stephen Moffat didn't write this setting, so clearly it is inferior to the one cooked up by Moffat's massive brain. Sorry, I'm stealing Stu Bagful's old jokes. I had to.
Yeah, what I was surprised to learn, because of how well it fits into the theoretical character arcs for this series, is that this was also apparently originally a Series 5 script or a Series 5 conception. Toby Whithouse had this idea, and basically because of, I think, production snags, they were okay, this is too expensive for this, but yeah, it's still, Toby Whithouse is clearly talented. He has there are thematic points in this episode that he has done in his previous 2 episodes that he has written, Vampires of Venice and School Reunion, that I'm sure we'll dive into. But it's just interesting how well he's able to key into the overall context of the series and write something that does this way better than anything else, except maybe The Girl Who Waited.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't know what he'd be like doing an actual arc. But that being said, I think he'd probably still be better at it than the current showrunner is. So, I honestly, if you would ask me, hey, Jeff, a writer, let's what writer that has already worked on the show would you want to become the new showrunner? I'd be like, oh, Toby Whithouse, easily.
Yeah, I think the last episode he did was the conclusion of the Monks arc, which, while I didn't love that, I didn't love the conclusion, I also think that got
fucked over. That one's not his fault.
Yeah, I would say it's also, like, probably partly due to the setup, and, like, he wasn't in charge of it from the beginning. I could just be giving him way too much credit for a bad situation.
No, I mean, like, Moffat has said that one got completely borked. That's absolutely not Toby Whithouse's fault.
Okay, then. Well, yeah, so I think I would be in agreement with Geoff. I can't think of any other than, like, powerhouses that have written, like, Dalek and Human Nature, and he obviously
yes,
didn't...
actually, yeah, okay, yes. If Rob Shearman wanted to become showrunner, yes, I would pick Rob Shearman, absolutely, because I think he's my favorite person who's ever written for the show in terms of the caliber and quality of what he's written. However, he's also not a, like, big TV writer, whereas, like, Toby Whithouse, like, created and ran Being Human, so...
Yeah, so, yeah, I understand. If you don't get him, I think Toby Whithouse is the next best choice. And obviously, like, Stephen Moffat had a pretty perfect record before he stepped into showrunner. So I'm not saying he would be infallible. It's just saying, like, compared to Chibnall and his work prior to being showrunner, I don't see why some other people weren't asked. Maybe they were and they turned it down. That is totally possible.
Yeah, but no, like, I this is all hearsay and mainly came from, like, shit, like, memes and shit posting on, like, TARDIS posting. But I have heard that, like, they tried to find other people and they had to, like, talk Chibnall into it. Like, people just didn't want to do it.
Probably because Moffat ended up getting, like, so overworked.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yes, it is basically a, like, if you're going to do that, then yeah, it's going to be like a commitment for, you know, like 5 or so years, and maybe a lot of people don't want to do that. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we have an episode to talk about.
Yeah. So yeah. You know, like we talked about Night Terrors. And how it kind of thought out of the box for its horror. But here, in the case of, like, I think once again, in the case of, like, how they implement, like, like everybody's individual fears, like, it's simultaneously it's predictable, but it's not, like, cliche. It's like, oh yeah, this makes sense. And I think surprisingly for, like, I don't know, I think this is one of the best, like, group of expendable characters that we've gotten since RTD.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
I would agree with
easily.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the convention of the episode exploring fears and, as we later find out, faith, that, I mean, to make that believable, you have to get deeper into the side characters than we usually get. And I think that's true for basically everyone, except maybe the gambler, but even him, he's at least acted well. So
yeah. Well, and you're not going to get too much about him because he's the one who gets killed off to explain what the hell's going on at the beginning anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I mean, and that's, like, the testament that we know that much about him, like, he was a gambler and he talks in these ways, is already, like, the caliber that you get on, like, the main side characters in a lot of Moffat era episodes. So already it's, like, off to a good start there.
Yeah. And it's like the ways that it explores different facets and ideas of fates. Like, we had the gambling thing, but also the fact that the fucking dumbass nerd thinks everything is a fucking, like, CIA conspiracy.
You know, it's nice of Toby Whithouse to give tankies some representation. I think...
I was thinking the same thing, the, like, inverted American imperialism, like, shaking hand at the sky, it was the CIA!
Yeah. But, so, yeah, like, sort of, like, it's not just faith in a deity or faith in a person. It is, you know, faith in, like, yes, this is what is happening all along.
Yeah, and even beside that, we still get nuances and different shades to the people. Like, yeah, he believes that America and the CIA control everything based.
Yeah.
No problem with that. But then, like, Rory mentions his stammer, and we see his fear with, like, the girls. Like, yeah, it's a little bit cliche, but it's just, like, all of these angles attacking this one character that, for all intents and purposes, is just, like, a narrative tool. Like, you didn't need to go that hard, but they do, and it adds to, like, the tapestry of the horror and the atmosphere and the threat that they're building. And that's even more true for... I hate that I forget her name.
Rita.
Rita.
Yes, that's even more true for her.
And it, like, yeah. And the fact that and also the fact that they, admittedly, they did choose an Abrahamic religion, but they didn't choose Christianity to as the religion to be represented by the person who has an explicit religious faith.
Yeah, and I mean, you could argue what if Judaism or Islam is more, like, maligned in the world, like, that's kind of a useless debate to have.
There's from what I'm pretty sure there's also, like, a sizable diaspora community in the UK too. So.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, like, while it is quote unquote mainstream, it's still, like, it felt very natural and very included, and I was just like, and I know that sounds like a very, like, kind of neo-lib / like center-right thing of, like, oh, it didn't feel like forced representation, but it didn't. It felt like acknowledging the character and doing it in a way that, take a drink, that Chibnall Who hasn't done. So it was...
Well, to be fair, Demons was pretty good, but that also wasn't written by Chibnall.
Yeah, so, yeah, that was nice. And again, that isn't the Muslim character. That's not what you walk away from this thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, we have this, you know, this really nice cast. I think he makes sense for the setting, and I'm not sure how much he's supposed to be annoying, but Givas is fucking annoying. Like, it does, you know, actually, okay. Actually, I'm going to take that back now that I think about it, because I was thinking about the first part of the episode where he's annoying, but they do sort of flesh it out and be like, oh, it's not just this one-note joke. There's this real menace and coldness in sort of throwing others away to save yourself.
Yeah,
instead of it just being the haha we surrender joke for 45 minutes.
Yeah, I'm reminded of, especially, like, there's obviously the self-preservation instinct, but with the character from the race that I'm forgetting, the cowards. First of all, it reminded me of a species in Star Trek, but aside from that, Toby Whithouse does a what? What did you say?
You mentioned Star Trek. Take a drink.
Yeah. We're all going to be drunk by the end of this. It's fine. But Toby Whithouse has this good thing of, like, even though we don't get a huge amount of depth of the Doctor, usually we drive more into the companions, he has a way of inserting certain lines or certain moments that really give you an insight into the Doctor. And the fact that at a certain point he's just like, you know, I always wondered why you survived, why you were the oldest, like, still, like, surviving species in the galaxy. And it's like, your cowardice isn't innocent, it's cruel and calculated. And you could almost like drive a point into like politically. I don't think Toby Woodhouse meant this, but like politically, how like there are cowards in every movement that are always willing to like betray, you know, any type of bulwark that's trying to be built, and just to screw everyone else and like save themselves. And like it was a great moment, and again a great addition to the cast in the unique way that he has faith that someone will save them, but because it's so like blanketed and open, like it's not any one race, it's not any one creed, he doesn't find his door, because it could literally be fucking anything. Like how does the prison deal with that? It's a very it's a character you wouldn't have to include in this episode to bring the point across, but again, it's just another interesting thing that like makes the tapestry of the episode, makes the script, makes the themes more complex, and makes them stand out more.
Yeah. And of course, Chad, Rory, like, it's kind of interesting because I feel like a lot of the time Rory does feel slightly underutilized, but what actually happens is that Rory comes in and is mostly underutilized, but when he comes in, they make it fucking count. Like, he usually gets like the best like little line or the best bit to be like, oh yeah,
for sure.
So like like how like he can just get out because he doesn't have that kind of faith in the same way. Or how, you know, he snarks that, like, whenever I see the doctor getting pally with someone, I feel the overwhelming urge to notify their next of kin.
Or the end with the car. Yeah, just...
Well, yeah, the car, like... and also, there was one... I'm trying to remember what he says when they're in, like, the stairwell... looking at where he says, I'd forgotten not all victories are about saving the universe.
Yeah, that was a really good moment. Rory's been on a roll last episode and this episode. You
know what, in fact, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that part of the reason why Series 7 Part 1 is kind of bad is because they don't really use Rory as much.
Rory,
I don't remember enough of the episodes to comment, but given the Flanderization of literally everything in 11's era, that's probably true.
Yeah.
I mean...
and this episode... Speaking of which, this episode's not very horny. Yay!
Yeah, I mean, Rory is really what makes or breaks a lot of episodes in 11's era, I think. Like, just... If an episode has, like, Rory coming through at least, and it's usually, like, pretty decent, but the episodes that, like, don't have him contributing, they tend to be a lot more eh.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Let's see. So, yeah. So we have this, sort of monster, but it's also like the monster isn't really that much of a monster in the sense that, like, yes, it's killing people, but also like they're being thrown in as food. Like the real sort of monster is whatever race did that to the Minotaur to begin with.
Yeah,
like,
it's very...
That was basically plucking people randomly and putting them there.
Yeah, it's very abstracted, which I think is a good choice, because if you got bogged down in motives of the thing, it would lose the thematic weight of, like, what happens and what conclusion this episode lands on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and we also have the thought that, like, what does he say? Oh, okay. Never mind. I forgot the line that, like, it came down onto a planet and got people to worship it. But the inhabitants built the prison for it. But yeah, no, it's a good setup to have, like, a good sort of weird Doctor Who episode in an unconventional setting.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Minotaur reminds me a lot of the Teller, which is, you know, obviously another Moffat episode. But just like the setup of, like, powerful creature that's kind of captured and co-opted and really just acts on instinct. In that case it's not instinct, but like forceful motivation. But that the protagonists have to sort of struggle against. And the difference is, in that situation, the Doctor is in control from the start, and in this one, he isn't. And it's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? Actually, we should cover Ghostlight for, like, our next bonus episode, because, like, Ghostlight is also a very weird horror-y episode in a like unconventional setting, but it's very different. But yeah, I like this gave me some Ghostlight vibes a little bit.
I want to say that I appreciate, and this just came to me, but it's true, that this is an episode about faith and kind of deconstructing why we have faith in things without coming off as Fedora Tippy anti-theism.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and really that was how I felt sort of about how Rita's faith was portrayed, because it was like, yeah, like this is that, like, it didn't put it down. And it also, like, it just sort of discussed this facet of the faith without really doing much comparison. The Doctor's just like, yeah, this is, like, I recognize this terminology that you're using, and sort of discussing what that means to her, instead of making any sort of statement or judgment upon the faith. Like, it's not like, yes, you're Muslim. That's so great. Yes, like, woo, represent, like, yes, it's or whatever. It's just like, yes, okay, so this is what you believe in. Let's talk about that a little.
Now I'm just imagining the Doctor saying, "Oh, you're Muslim. That's so poggers."
Yeah.
Don't manifest it. Don't let them
13, know. The series 13, baby. It's
oh
coming.
My god. They would have 13 say poggers, wouldn't they?
Probably.
Which one was it that flossed or something?
What?
Or did one of them dab? I don't know why.
I think it was Peter Capaldi dabbed in a Zoom call.
And Missy dabbed in
That's
his
right.
last
That's what it was.
Episode, but
yeah.
Rita gave me huge Linda with a Y vibes.
Oh yeah, no, it is exactly. It's the same. It's Rory says it whenever the Doctor gets real, like, pally with someone. I feel the overwhelming urge to notify their next of kin. Like, yeah, you know she's not going to survive.
Yeah, I wish we kind of had more characters, not necessarily die because of it, but, like, more characters who the Doctor would, like, latch onto, I guess would be the right word.
Yeah.
And it's appropriate for this episode because, again, themes and narrative and character arc, all that good stuff. But it's just, it's nice to have, like, some competency in the side cast and to see the Doctor act the way he is around the companions, but for people who aren't them, if that makes sense. It's a very neat trope that I like. So yeah, it was notable because, like, I forgot that they did that, and it's just like, holy crap, it's been like 5 series since you've done this. Nice.
Yeah. No, and it's also yeah, and it sort of allows it allows a bit more of a interesting dynamic by sort of pairing him with someone else than the usual companions, which especially helps because these companions are on their way out. Yeah. Another thing that I also really, really, really adore is, once again, the way that like he sort of realizes like, oh, like I did this to myself. Like he basically goes, oh, I told them to go like have faith, and that faith is literally what led to their deaths. And it really sort of, it ties in with last week's episode too, about how his good intentions aren't cutting it because he's getting too glib, too used to doing it. And it's yeah,
it's a good moment.
And it eventually gets to the point where he realizes, like, some of it is to break his faith, but also I think it is really worth stating that I think he does mean when he says, like, I stole your childhood and now I've led you by the hand to your death because I was vain. Like, I wanted to look cool for someone.
Yeah. I mean, that was really the moment that sold us on this episode, because he is speaking genuinely there. It is stuff he knows. And I think one of the things I really appreciate about this arc is, like, you get it in sort of, I mean, I don't want to say subtle, but you don't get it in as explicit terms in sort of RTD Who, where it's just sort of that dynamic where, like, the entire idea of companions is kind of fucked up. And I feel like that's addressed a lot more with this arc, like the whole arc between Amy and the Doctor, because it starts off already on like a pretty shady note. I would argue he almost just takes her along with him out of a sense of obligation at that point, because he knows it's like, he clearly knows it's kind of sus, but it's like he kind of feels like he has to, or else it'll fuck her up even more if he abandons her again. And so it already starts out with this dependency, and he just sort of has to, I mean, at this point, just break it really forcefully. Like, he knows that it's sort of this Band-Aid that he hasn't been ripping off because he hasn't wanted to, like, deal with that, and because he's selfish and doesn't want to travel alone. And I feel like this is sort of that moment where he kind of has to, like, face up to his own shit and be like, yeah, I'm kind of fucked up. This whole thing is kind of fucked up. And then, of course, it gets wasted, but in the context of this episode, it's very compelling.
Yeah, especially the camera and scene work, flipping back between young Amelia and Amy, and him saying, "It's time I see you for who you really are." And I don't, for all the literalists out there, I don't think he literally sees her as like 12 or however young she is. I think it's just very good merging of the symbolic and the literal. TV and visual media at its best. I could nitpick this. It works fantastically within the context of the episode. I just wonder, like, how her faith in the Doctor hasn't been already at least shaken by the events of, like...
I think it was. You can finish, but I have something to say on that.
Sure. But no, yeah, I just thought, like, well, he already, like, lost your daughter and, like, screwed all this up. And you could argue, like, well, that's not his fault. But it's like, the faith should at least be shaken. And I know there's, like, kind of a throwaway line that, like, oh, the doctor has let me down before, but in the end, he always comes through. And I guess the point is that he's saying, like, no, I won't always come through. And that's the kicker, but it's weird in the context of the season. And again, we went on a whole thing about the context of the season last episode. I don't want to do that again, but it's just like, again, it's very weird because you have to take the good episodes and almost, like, isolate them, even though the good episodes of this series have everything to do with consequence and everything to do with character arcs that just kind of don't exist outside of that episode. So it's a weird thing. I'm willing to do it because, damn it, this episode is fantastic. But it's one of those things that holds it back from being, like, perfect, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. And like, it kind of, like, earlier on, like, last week, I said that I felt like Angels Take Manhattan was kind of required for, like, him to become, like, an edgy bitch or whatever. But actually, when I think about it, no, it doesn't. Because here we still have, like, a golden opportunity for him to basically be like, yeah, okay, I can't do this anymore. I can't take any more companions. And sort of ending up where we found him last time.
Yeah, it feels like there should be some sort of evolution on what companion means. And I will give the show some weird small credit for this, in that since Amy and Rory a companion... Actually, no, I can't say that because Chibnall, who screwed this up again. But but Clara doesn't live on the TARDIS, even when she wasn't, like, dating Danny or whatever. Like, she never did that. And Bill and Nardole don't do that in Series 10. But the fam does, and that could be, like, a thing that you could explore, but they kind of really don't. So it's just, it's a weird thing where it's just like there's some carryover and some consequence, but it's more of just like well, I guess we'll do this now, and less of a purposeful, like, follow-up. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, like, how could they, like, keep having more than one character? Because obviously that's integral to, like, having an entertaining show, but make it so there is some evolution from, like, I'm just gonna basically kidnap people and then they're with me and can just travel around until they get killed. And so I was thinking about that, and I think Nardole is a really good example of that, like, upending that dynamic where it's someone who's keeping him and someone who is, like, competent in their own right. Not to say the other companions weren't competent, but that there's that sort of, like, gap in knowledge and, like, who's in charge and kind of dynamic. And you get that a bit with Clara, where they kind of start to be more even and like authority between each other, but at the same time it does because it's, like, unhealthy in a different way. And so I think Nardole is just a really good prototype for, like, what kinds of companions he could start moving towards. And they don't do that, but maybe they will in the future. But yeah,
definitely. All right. And, you know, it's like, it feels short-sighted because, like, the Doctor literally says as what's the alternative? Me standing over your grave, over your broken body, over Rory's body. He literally does that later.
Yeah.
Because somehow this just fucking ends up happening again. And it feels it doesn't feel like it's written as like, oh, these people shouldn't have gone back together again. It's like, woohoo, more companion adventures, let's go. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, and now they're dead.
Yeah, it feels very like, I don't know, like when people say the meme of George Lucas saying like it's poetry, it rhymes, except it doesn't rhyme for any purpose. Like, yeah, you technically foreshadowed that, but you didn't earn you didn't earn the fulfillment of that line. At least beyond, like, I'll grant the scene where Amy, like, says goodbye to 11 is very emotional. It's just kind of bullshit how they got there in the first place. So, but again, that's going off on even more stuff. It's just, it's weird. The denouement after the conclusion, after they leave the hotel, it's a very weird thing, because like 3 episodes later, it basically doesn't count. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, all right, anything else before we move on to ratings?
I'll say there's stuff you could nitpick here, as there is with anything. The fact that the hotel is basically like a Star Trek level holodeck, which are already ridiculously, basically magic, that's fine. The fact that people just kind of open doors, even though like they know the danger of doing that, again.
Well, I think there was some stuff mentioned that it was like they sort of get compelled to do it when they're close by the same sort of
it is a compulsion. I'm not saying you can't explain that away. It's just someone, especially people who are like Amy, and Rory, who are like versed in like in the bullshit, in like being in these high stress situations. But I understand, for the themes, for the story, for the character, again, as I've said 1,000 times, you can get away with dumb shit if you fulfill on like the consequences, which for the most part within this episode they do that. It's just, again, I like pointing out that like nothing is technically like airtight plot hole wise. You can always find some things, and beyond that, that's all I have left.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, stuff like that is stuff I didn't even notice. It just brushed right past me because, just the whole episode is so good. The one thing I will say with the hotel is it's very obviously, I think, in my opinion, meant to be reminiscent of the Grand Overlook Hotel from The Shining.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely.
It was definitely like visual referential stuff there, like with the pictures on the walls and stuff, as well as just like the designs of the carpets, and even like the shots they use are reminiscent of the sort of labyrinthian nature of that hotel. It was definitely a callback, I think. And they sort of said, that the hotel was like a glitch, that it got stuck on an old setting. So I would guess that was sort of a nod to say like someone in the past, they had a giant fear of that movie and like it just got stuck on that, which I think is funny.
Yeah.
I think that's a very intentional choice, that it gets stuck on a visual thing from the past, because of I don't know if we talked about this, the line at the end that the Minotaur gives the Doctor. I think that's something we need to talk about first. Just at the end when he's dying, he sort of goes like, an ancient creature trapped in a labyrinth, constantly killing others. For such a creature, death would be a mercy. And the Doctor's like, get your rest. Now it's time to die. And then like with his dying breath.
No, I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about you.
Yeah, just that line is just, and so that's why I think the sort of having him traveling around in a visual representation coded in past tropes is sort of his equivalent to the TARDIS being stuck on a police box almost. It's really good.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess moving on to ratings. it's in kind of in this back half here, it just suddenly pops into like, oh, hey, like here's where they were hiding all the good shit in the season. Yeah, it's just Toby Whithouse pulls off another banger like it's nothing. Yeah, and just it's amazing ruminations on faith, how we as humans, what we find faith in, and how that can be used to manipulate us, and the companion experience as a whole, and feels like the astonishing. It feels like this big denouement for the idea or the core conceit of Eleven and Amy, and it's just a shame that it kind of continued to not die for a amount of time longer.
For sure. Yeah, Toby Whithouse has these reoccurring themes in his Doctor Who works. School reunion, you got the old companion versus the new. And how that affects the new companion. What does the Doctor say about that? We get a little bit of this dynamic in Vampires of Venice. Absolutely brilliant. It's an episode so notable that Stephen Moffat references it in Eleven's finale about him seeing the crack in his room of like, this is my fear. I knew it would come back one day. So that's neat. Just shows the power of this episode even beyond the characters and the arc of the moment. And I just realized I think I interrupted you before you gave your exact rating. So I'll let you do that, and then I'll say mine.
Yeah. No, I think I forgot to say my rating. Yeah, it's another A+. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I'd give mine just because this is my conflict, because can I really dock the episode points for doing such a good job that it technically is better than... It does stuff with the arc and the characters that isn't followed through with, but it's still doing them, and I don't think I can give this episode penalty in this points just because the rest of this series doesn't do the legwork to really earn the conclusion. So I think I gave The Girl Who Waited an S, and that's because it doesn't really, like, you could still have that episode and not have a great series. That's not awesome, but you could still have that. So I think I'll give this episode an A+.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I liked this one more than The Girl Who Waited. This was just, I mean, it's definitely up there for one of my favorite 10s, easily. It's going to be a 10, easily. It's amazing, and the themes just really resonate with us, and just the depiction of it and the way it plays out is just really masterful. It's an easy 10.
Yeah. All right, well, next week we will be taking a look. Oh, God. We have to talk about fucking Craig next week. Yeah, next week we'll talk about Closing Time. Whoop-de-fucking-do. You can follow us on Twitter at B2TARDISPod, and you can support us on Patreon for a number of benefits, like early access to the episode where we talk about Craig, being able to listen in live to the episode where we talk about Craig, and potentially even the ability to guest star on the episode where we talk about fucking Craig. I'm Jeff. You can find me on Twitter at WheatleyDL.
The CIA controls everything. You can find me at skyhigh9_5 on the twitter.com.
I'm Dirk. You can find me at Nomadiclastic on twitter.com.
And we will see you all next week.
That really got to you.
Yeah.
When you were